right, let's get started. We have, looks like critical mass. Thank you all again for joining us today. We are here today to talk a little about hydrogen and what's happening in the hydrogen verse, particularly here in California. We know that many of our clients and our fleet customers are interested in what's going on with hydrogen, thinking about it in terms of long distance vehicles or in terms of buses. And we just want to give a little ground information. And I'm joined with David Park, who is with the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of a tee off, and then we will kick it over to Dave, who is going to get into the meat of what goes on with hydrogen and fuel cells. So let me get my slides going here, and I'm going to share my screen. And we are off. So we're here today as part of our project with the San Joaquin Council of Governments, working on an overall countywide plan for zero emission vehicle infrastructure. That's both charging stations and hydrogen stations, serving cars, trucks, buses, potentially port equipment, and everything in between. So let me tell you where I got started with hydrogen and why I am your leader for this is I drive a fuel cell car. I live and work in West Sacramento. I have been part of the California Fuel Cell Partnership for 15 years. But I was also one of the very first people in the state of California to lease a fuel cell vehicle, a hydrogen Clarity. I'm actually on my second Clarity now, and I have driven it across the state. I have not driven it out of the state, but I also have driven them across the country 5 times on different types of PR events. I've also been with battery vehicles, them across the country and around the state and used hydrogen stations. So I do have a really good feel for it. And I believe that as we move forward into a zero emission future, we will need fuel cells and batteries. We're also going to need more carbon negative fuels like renewable diesel and renewable natural gas that come from agricultural waste so that we can reach a zero emission future. I don't think that these are an either or, batteries or fuel cells. I think that people will select something that fits their lifestyle, just like they pick an iPhone or an Android or pick a PC or a Macintosh today. So let's start just a quick overview about kind of the differences between a hydrogen station, and you see a dispenser for the Shell station here in Sacramento on the left, and fast fueling or fast charging, and you see the EVgo fast charging network in Sacramento on the right. Well, in that hydrogen station for me in my car, it's a 5-minute fill, 6-minute fill, about there, 240 plus miles of range. My car does about 320 miles of range. I'm averaging right now in my vehicle about between 68 and 69 miles per kilogram or gallon equivalent. Most hydrogen stations are in existing gas stations. They are a dispenser that's been added to a gas station. And just like we fill cars and trucks differently today, in the future, it is very likely that there will be hydrogen islands for cars and hydrogen islands for trucks. Those might be at the same gas station, just like you see today at a travel plaza, or they might be in 2 different places. One station can fill hundreds of vehicles. The amount of vehicles per day is by the number of nozzles or connection points and the amount of hydrogen that can be stored on site. And there are several ways to distribute hydrogen, including being made on site. Hydrogen is already designated as a retail motor fuel and is governed by our California Department of Agriculture measurement standards into how the dispensers act and how they must display the units of measurement and the tolerance for accuracy. So on the other hand, we have charging stations. Quick and slow, you can get up to 120 miles of range in under an hour on a very high-speed fast charging. you're typically going to charge where you're parked, whereas with hydrogen, you're going to fill on your way to go somewhere else. One DC fast that really does assume a back-to-back charging all day long. Charging has an existing distribution system in our power network, although we are learning that in some cases that existing distribution system has to be upgraded or increased. And it is a very familiar energy source that is also on its way to being made as a motor fuel that will have all of those weights and measures certifications about selling by the kilogram and assuring a tolerance and how you can charge for the fuel. So they're similar in some respects, they're dissimilar in other respects. But what I really want to talk to you about is the overall opportunities that we have with hydrogen in San Joaquin County, within the Central Valley, and all the way up into Sacramento. And the first part of that is with production. And we're seeing a lot of green hydrogen production, including some interest in the energy center in Lodi of moving into using electrolysis from excess wind and solar to produce hydrogen that can be used to make energy. We also have a lot going on with biomass, and biomass would be like our cow manure ponds, or it could be what we have left over at the end of a planting season with the grapes. We've heard a lot recently about how we can't burn almond groves anymore, and how we take that waste wood and using it. So that's biomass. And then waste methane is what comes from a wastewater treatment plant or from a landfill. And they are all three very valid ways for the Central Valley and the Sacramento area to make hydrogen from things that we already have. Then we also look at those hydrogen uses and how they can be used in the future. And it certainly is a ZEV fuel like the car that I drive. One of the things I really want you to think about is its opportunity to provide a ZEV fuel for multifamily or rental housing. It gives us the ability to have one central station that could provide that ZEV fuel for hundreds and hundreds of folks that are living in multifamily. It's also a great fuel for trucks and locomotives. We are seeing the first freight locomotive go into service soon in the Sacramento area as part of a project at the Port of West Sacramento. And there have also been 4 passenger locomotives just recently awarded as part of the Valley Rail project. So we'll see those first locomotives come in the United States. Those fuel cell locomotives are already in use in Europe. Then we see more opportunities for off-road equipment, construction, port equipment, light rail trains. We're seeing those as a good future as well as blending in the pipeline to make electricity. So hydrogen isn't just a one thing. It has things we're doing today, filling cars, and lots of opportunities for what we want to do tomorrow. And you know, the one thing I left off my slide was transit buses, because we're also seeing that movement within transit districts to go into hydrogen as well. And I think that Dave is going to talk a little bit more about that. So I'm leaving my information up here for a minute as we switch over, Dave. And I'm just curious if you have any questions. I'm going to stop my screen share and want to ask you if there are any questions or chats or things that we should know before we move on.
And Chris, one quick note, I saw in the Q&A that the chat box was disabled and folks are not able to post their information.
Okay, I was worried about that, and I am going to see if I can fix that. I am not a Zoom person, and hopefully Elsa is still on and she can fix that. But in the meantime, please do use the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we are paying attention to that. So
all right.
With that, I will pass it over to you, Dave. I'm going to turn my camera off and see if I can get the chat enabled.
Great, excellent. Good afternoon, everybody. This is David Park. I am with the, as Chris mentioned, with the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership. Let me share my screen. And hopefully that works. Let me start the slideshow now. And Chris, can you tell me if you can see my screen?
I do not see your screen. I do not see your screen, and I think I enabled the chat.
Okay, great, great. Well, I'll get started. I think there is a lag in my computer. Apologies, everybody, but good afternoon. This is David Park. I am the Industry Affairs Director for the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership. I'm very happy to be here today with the beautiful people of the Central Valley and Sacramento region. I was supposed to be speaking in Nevada and Las Vegas today, but that was canceled. So I'm happy to be back in California. I have nothing against Nevada. I'm actually from New York. I hope you don't hold that against me, but I do prefer California to New York as well. That's why I'm here. But anyway, I'm going to give you a warning. This is a spoiler alert, an Arches spoiler alert. So if you don't wish to be spoiled, tune away for the next minute. And I'm going to go to the next slide in 3, 2, 1. All right. In the words of our dear friend and colleague and incoming board chair at the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership, Tyson Eckersley, we are on a journey.
We still do not see your slides, and I'm
Oh.
wondering if you could just try sharing again.
Yep. Let me try disconnect and reconnect. Stop slideshow. There we go. All right.
Here it comes. Perfect.
Sorry about that. Let me start with the show again. Apologies, as Chris mentioned, I am also a Zoom neophyte, so apologies, everyone. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1. We are on a journey. I hope Tyson doesn't hold this against me, but this is the start of his Arches presentation. He did present it to our board last week, and there will be, I imagine he'll be presenting it to the working group that's meeting this week in Long Beach. But it's true. We were on a journey, and welcome. I was invited to join this journey about 4 years ago when I was invited by my colleagues at Frontier Energy to join the California Fuel Cell Partnership, which is now the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership. We are a recently recognized 501c3 by the IRS. But prior to that, the California Fuel Cell Partnership was a organization, a public-private partnership, and it's exactly that, a public-private partnership that was pulled together by the California Air Resources Board. The only binding structure to that partnership was really a memorandum of understanding where the Air Resources Board was able to convince the members of the automotive industry, the energy industry, the industrial gas company world to join together to create a hydrogen economy in California. That was that group coalesced around a central theme where the hydrogen economy in California would be created and seeded using the basic building block of a fuel cell electric automobile, which would be watered and fertilized by a network of hydrogen fueling stations. So that economy actually became a reality in 2015 with the introduction of the Toyota Mirai Gen 1, what's shown here is the Generation 2 Mirai, the Hyundai Nexo, and the Honda Clarity fuel cell. When the milestone was reached where a commercially available fuel cell electric vehicle was available at dealerships, the agreement was the Air Resources Board would step back as the chair of this organization, and the group would move to a autonomous board of directors. The structure currently is where every year our board chair changes to a different member. The current board chair is Joe Capello, the CEO of Iwatani Corporation of America. The immediate past board chair was Sandy Berg, also the current vice board chair of the California Air Resources Board. And the incoming board chair for 2023 is Tyson Eckerly of GoBiz. The partnership is still 100% staffed by employees of Frontier Energy, which is a consulting firm that is an incarnation of BKS, the original consulting firm that was brought on to staff the partnership 22 years ago. So we're going to take a meandering path through the historical evolution of the fuel cell and hydrogen industry in California, which we're very much right at the beginning of the story. And Chris, I see that this this bar is across the top of my screen. Is that blocking the slide?
No.
Okay, perfect. All right, it's blocking it on my screen. So, so back in when the original fuel cell vision was created by this partnership, and is certainly before my time, the automakers indicated that they required 68 hydrogen stations to enable a market launch in California. And so what happened was the state put funds towards the development of this network of hydrogen fueling stations through a grant process run by the California Energy Commission. But unfortunately, the market launched in 2015 with something on the order of 25 fueling stations. And unfortunately, it's unfortunate because the state was not able to meet that 68 station goal that was set by the automakers. The automakers decided to go ahead and launch their vehicles. As mentioned, Toyota, Hyundai, and Honda all launched vehicles in 2015. Some automakers were not comfortable introducing fuel cell electric vehicles to the marketplace. So even though they had developed the technology, they decided that they did not want to risk a customer experience where it would be challenging to get hydrogen fuel. They did not want to introduce that experience to their customers, so they decided against introducing vehicles to California. I chalk this up as growing pains. If you think about the monumental task of starting a new energy economy, bumps in the road are inevitable. And this is the starting place. And just to frame this hydrogen economy around where we are as a civilization, think about how many energy economies actually exist since the dawn of time and the discovery of fire. We have wood, coal, natural gas, electricity, oil, and nuclear. What comes after that? I would posit to say that it's hydrogen. So let's start digging into what that hydrogen economy actually looks like. The California market status I introduced to you is it started in the light duty space. It is a nucleus around which the economy can grow. The reason why the state or why the economy chose light duty is it needed a starting place, and that was where the automotive companies decided that was the basic building block they needed to create this bigger, wider economy that spans everything from transportation to energy production, to industrial uses of energy, and so on and so forth. So the way I look at the California model is we had to start somewhere. They chose the automotive space to start. and we need to continue to grow that space and expand out of that space. There are some that say that the automotive space is not the right place to start, and that the industry should shift all of its focus into, for instance, heavy duty transport. And to be perfectly frank, I think that that would be a mistake. The investment has already been placed. The state has put something on the order of, I don't know, $500 million into the development of this hydrogen fueling network. The automotive companies certainly have invested more than that collectively and possibly individually. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but they have started this economy. And if you think about not the vehicle, but the power plant, the automotive sector represents a method for achieving economies of scale of the power plant that can be used across the entire spectrum of the industry, and not just in automobiles, but it can be used in cars, it can be used in trucks, it can be used in construction equipment. But at its very basic framework, the power plant can be mass produced. And so we need to look at ways to scale that production to be used across the entire sphere of our transportation and mobility world, and then dabbling into those non-road sectors such as locomotive, as Chris mentioned, hovercraft, or even construction equipment and other non-road uses. But looking at this chart, you can see in 1 year, we went from 11,000 fuel cell electric vehicles, 11,600, to about 14,000 fuel cell electric vehicles on the road today here in California. California is the only market for hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. We have an emerging bus market, as Chris mentioned. Transit agencies are moving towards complying with the Air Resources Board bus electrification requirements. And so last year we've had almost a doubling of fuel cell electric buses as bus companies are feeling out the economics of running an electrified bus fleet, and they're finding that hydrogen is a more versatile power source on the logistics and handling side. And then we have an emerging truck market, which is extremely exciting and is extremely complementary to the automotive market that we already have on the road. So if you look at these numbers, you'll see that we have 54 hydrogen stations here in California available today. That is still short of the 68 station goal that was set in for 2015. So there are challenges, again, bumps in the road regarding the availability of hydrogen for retail fueling, but you can see that there is going to be a massive amount of development where we have 117 stations in the pipeline ready to go. And so if you go to this link at the bottom of the page, it's or if you Google H2FCP by the numbers, it'll take you to this map, and you can see where all the development locations are in the state of California. As you can see, the concentration is around the urban areas of San Francisco and Los Angeles. You have to think about this as a new marketplace. These are the seeds, and the goal is to start infilling the Central Valley, which is incredibly important for both the automotive and the truck market. We need to see more development in Sacramento, and then we need to see development points north, getting into Oregon, because there's a great deal of activity going on in Oregon, and then also the state of Washington around vehicle electrification on this I-5 corridor. And then also we need to see development happening in San Diego to expand that market. But what we have here is the nucleus of really a global economy. what's driving all of this? I think you're all well aware of this. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but there have been several executive orders that have indicated that California needs to move towards a zero emission vehicle economy. We have ARB responding to those executive orders and to their Clean Air Act goals to introduce zero emission vehicles into the state at an accelerated path. The goal is not only to reduce carbon, but also to reduce criteria pollutants. Primarily in California, those criteria pollutants are ozone and particulate matter, but the zero emission vehicle is complementary to all of those categories of air pollutant. And so that's why the pressure is on to moving the state towards vehicle electrification. When you combust any fuel, you'll still get some of those criteria pollutant impacts. So needless to say, we have the most aggressive environmental transportation targets in the country and the world, and the state is doubling down on accelerating towards those goals. So let's get into some of the policy and market leadership activities. So I mentioned previously the Governor's Office of Economic Development, GoBiz, and they have set a framework around which this ZEV transition can occur. This document is available online. You see the link below, but it is the market development strategy. But as you go through this document, this will very much align you with where GoBiz is moving, as a economic development engine within the state of California. But then it'll also give you some ideas and clues into how they're organizing the ARCHES work that's ongoing. ARCHES being the California framework for pursuing some of the US DOE hydrogen hubs funds. And so I'll get into that a little bit more later, but let's focus on what GoBiz's core objectives are. Their goal is to just get the entire ecosystem in California around some core principles for to achieve the carbon reduction goals. Identify what the targets are for the state, and then identify the roles and objectives of agencies and major stakeholder groups. Then they will create that collective problem solving around the challenges around this really ambitious goal to grow and expand a hydrogen energy economy, and collectively determine how to get over all of these roadblocks, such as how do we accelerate the pace at which we develop hydrogen fueling stations in the state, and how do we start introducing other vehicle classes into that ecosystem. But these are what they call their 4 pillars: vehicles, infrastructure, end users, and workforce. Those are the pillars that GoBiz is focused on with their ZEV development strategy, and clearly for their work, with ARCHES. The way I look at it is ARCHES is accelerating, and the US DOE Hydrogen Hubs is accelerating that process to achieve this ZEV transition. The place the fuel cell partnership fits in this entire framework is we did start out as a California-centric organization. Our new mission is to expand our geographic scope to include the entire US. But at our core, at the core of the fuel cell partnership, is we are a public-private partnership. We bring in all of the players in this ecosystem where they can have safe conversation and come to consensus quickly and accelerate the pace of development of the economy. We are the first hydrogen economy in the world. There are economies that exist in Japan and Germany. Those are the two other major economies, and Korea, excuse me. Those are the three other major hydrogen economies in the world. Right now, where it sits is California and Korea are actually about neck to neck in terms of the establishment of a hydrogen transportation economy. As an organization, we set roadmaps, we set visions to identify targets that society can, stretch to achieve. We published this document in, I think, 2014, 2015, when we launched the commercial marketplace. This predates the governor's executive orders that I just posted. And then, as you're probably aware, the California Air Resources Board Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation. The goal that we set is 1,000 hydrogen fueling stations to support 1,000 fuel cell electric vehicles by 2030. And that is very much in line with the CARB Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation, because without that complementary option for zero emission energy in the transportation sector, it's going to be very difficult to meet those the milestones set by Advanced Clean Cars 2, which is 100% ZEV sales in the automotive sector by 2035. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this. You're welcome to download the Fuel Cell Revolution document from our website, but at the bottom line, customer adoption is key. It's going to be key for the ZEV transition. And unless we set the right market conditions to facilitate that transition, it's going to be very, very challenging to meet those regulatory goals. Again, looking at the goals of the fuel cell revolution in the automotive space, we set 1,000 hydrogen fueling stations to support 1 million fuel cell electric vehicles. And these are some of the benefits that would result from that. So then we shifted our goals, and in fact, I apologize for those from the transit sector, but we actually do have a transit bus vision document as well. But I'm jumping right over into the fuel cell truck vision, and that is because this is the next targeted area where our members are really focusing the direction of the organization. And that was a board directive. Our board said, all right, we've launched the fuel cell electric vehicle market and automotive market. Now let's collectively launch a fuel cell electric truck market. And so we have many members of the truck industry on our board of directors. We have, for instance, Daimler Truck, Cummins, Nikola, Toyota with a partnership with Kenworth, a joint venture between Daimler Truck and Volvo called Cellcentric, and I'm Hyzon, and I'm hoping that I have not left anyone out, but that gives you a list of a who's who in the truck development marketplace. But we have set a vision for achieving a ecosystem of automobiles, light duty vehicles, and medium duty and heavy duty trucks in a synergistic relationship where each accelerates the development and deployment of the other. The beauty of the truck market is it scales hydrogen. A single truck can fill about 80 kilograms of hydrogen. That's the approximate benchmark for the truck industry. Whereas an automobile fills, today it fills between 5 and 7 kilograms of hydrogen in a single fill versus 80 kilograms, a multiplier of over 10 times in a single Class 8 tractor. So what that represents is the ability to get to economies of scale in the hydrogen production side. And then on the fuel cell manufacturing side, an automotive market represents many, many more fuel cells produced. So that then could be absorbed in the truck market. So the two are very much complementary in terms of achieving economies of scale of the fuel and then of the power plant. So the truck vision that we set is 200 hydrogen stations specifically supporting heavy duty trucks and transportation and goods movement. And those 200 stations would fuel about 70,000 trucks. And again, you can see the metrics regarding the benefits of that transition. So in terms of market transformation mechanisms, clearly the state has been an active player in rolling out this economy. This is just an example, but this is the last grant funding opportunity that was offered by the CEC, the California Energy Commission. It was $115 million that were released in 2020 to support the construction of 114 retail hydrogen fueling stations. There are many indicators regarding economy development that can be associated with this, in that in this last round of stations, what we saw a significant decrease in the cost of building stations and an increase in the performance of the individual station. As a benchmark, when the market launched, it cost somewhere on the order of $2.5 million to build a hydrogen fueling station that consisted of one dispenser, a single hose, that had at that station about, I don't know, somewhere between 300 to 500 kilograms of gaseous hydrogen storage. What we're seeing right now, today on the ground, we're seeing stations that are being constructed that have 4 fueling positions, and they have on-site liquid hydrogen storage on the order of 1,200 kilograms. So we're seeing a quadrupling of the number of fueling positions. We're seeing a approximate tripling to quadrupling of the storage capacity at each station. And we're seeing that at a cost of somewhere on the order of $1.5 to $1.8 million. So we're seeing a significant decrease in cost. And then on top of that, what we're seeing is the deployment time from planning to commissioning of the station. What took in the beginning on the order of 4 years is now taking closer to 18 months. And in some cases, it's getting compressed to 12 months. What I can't leave out of this discussion is the value or the low carbon fuel standard that California pioneered, also through the California Air Resources Board. But the low carbon fuel standard offers the development community a way to mitigate risk. And so they can, when they build a station, if there is not enough demand from the vehicle side to meet the needs of the station can make up for that deficit in revenue through low carbon fuel standard credits. And I'd like to point out that the hydrogen network in California is either, if it's not at, it's very close to 100% renewable content. Of course, they do use some financial mechanisms such as renewable energy credits to make up for deficits in their carbon, in the carbon footprint of their fuel supply. But all of the hydrogen retailers are providing close to 100% carbon-free hydrogen. The LCFS program is the de facto standard in California for renewable content. By statute, the fuel providers are required to provide 33% renewable content fuel for the transportation network, for the ZEV transportation network. But in order to start generating LCFS credits, currently they have to meet a minimum 40% renewable content. They are indeed actually exceeding that and carrying that all the way to 100% renewable. So one of the areas of great need that was identified mid-pandemic was we needed more hydrogen. The amount of hydrogen that was available on the in the marketplace versus the demand from the growing fuel cell electric vehicle population in California indicated that we needed more production and more distribution, just supply chain certainty across the board. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing more production plants coming online. What I'm showing here is the Air Liquide Las Vegas hydrogen production plant that just opened, I want to say last May, but it is capable of producing 30 tons per day liquid hydrogen using renewable feedstock. So as I mentioned, we are meandering, and I apologize. I'm throwing a lot of information at you. I'll share my contact information at the end. Feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm more than happy to bring you up to speed. But the California Air Resources Board published what's called the Self-Sufficiency Study. It identifies what is necessary from the state of California to achieve a 100% self-sufficient hydrogen economy, where the state no longer has to subsidize the construction of fueling stations. This study is focused primarily on the light duty market, but it's actually, the results are actually quite astounding, because the indication is that the state would only need to invest a maximum of an additional $300 million into the developmental process of light duty retail fueling stations to achieve self-sufficiency, where we have light off, where private investors come into the state. There is a positive ROI case that's made for the construction and deployment of hydrogen fueling stations. And the state can completely off-ramp, can completely step away from subsidizing, putting taxpayer money into the developmental process. And then you have a self-sufficient capital market supporting retail hydrogen fueling. That $300 million represents somewhere between 10% and 40% of annual cash flow. And it's similar to to what was reported in that last grant funding opportunity that CEC put out, the $115 million that I mentioned previously. So what this points to is the state is on the cusp of achieving a self-sufficient retail market that will be complemented by a self-sufficient heavy-duty market as the two evolve together. So these are the goals of the partnership. These were the goals of the California Fuel Cell Partnership: drive market success, win hearts and minds, be the trusted resource. One of our members pointed out at our last meeting that there is no organization that exists in the world like the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership. We are a collaboration with a common goal. We bring together policymakers, the regulatory community, the industry folks, and we identify how we can remove friction from the marketplace so that the market can accelerate together and we can jointly achieve this ecosystem that the world desperately needs. So we are accelerating. We're actually accelerating out of California and into the country, the rest of the country. I'm going to throw some slides up that our executive director has been, he's been shopping around. These are just concepts of how do we expand out of California. One of our thoughts is that the ports represent a unique opportunity, especially in California, since we have some of the largest ports in the nation. But if we start connecting the dots, if we start connecting the port areas, that shows some natural connectivity, some natural connective tissue where hubs can start to evolve in the greater United States. And then over the years, we can start infilling the interstate network with hydrogen fueling stations using the trucking network as the seeding mechanism for achieving a broader and more holistic hydrogen economy. So the hubs has a production focus. What we're identifying on this map are areas where there might be opportunities to institute production so that it can support this, web of connected hydrogen fueling infrastructure across the country. We will continue our national expansion, or we'll continue our work to provide that, that backbone to the industry. The Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership, our board asked us to step above the DOE hubs activity and not align with any individual hub, but act as advisors and visionaries and strategists to all prospective hubs in the country. Regardless of whether they get funded or not, we will support those that developmental activity, because eventually we want the entire US to be a healthy, sustainable economy. These are some of the slides that GoBiz has presented and will be presenting on their ARCHES effort. These are slides that were presented to our executive board last week. ARCHES being the California effort to apply for a US DOE hydrogen hub. They are taking a holistic approach to this, and they are right now in the process of recruiting members. GoBiz has the legislative authority from the state to be the California entity to apply for a US DOE hydrogen hub, or to submit the hydrogen hub application for the state of California. Its founding members are the Governor's Office of Economic Development, or GoBiz, the University of California system, the IBEW and NECA unions, and then the Renewables 100 Policy Institute. These are the governing principles that they have adopted. Be representative, be transparent, be responsive and nimble, create market opportunities, and be fair. Their North Star is aligned with the US DOE Hydrogen Hub's goal, which is to achieve $1 per kilogram renewable hydrogen produced by 2031 and $2 per kilogram produced by 2026. So, in the words of Tyson Eckerly, we started our journey at the beginning, but our destination is an economically sustainable and growing renewable hydrogen marketplace. And with that, here's my contact information. And I'll be happy to take any questions from you, Chris, or from any of the audience members.
So thanks so much, Dave. And we're going to leave that up there on the screen for a few minutes. And we did have a couple of in the chat to share your slides. So we'll make sure that we get those from you, Dave, to share. I do want to mention on the Arches project, that group is just forming and getting kicked off. I will tell you that City of Lodi is part of Arches. Valley Clean Air Now is part of Arches, and the Northern California Power Alliance is already part of Arches as well. I did put the link in the chat so that you can see on the page that says network, already a part of that overall project. And Dave, I wonder, maybe just for folks who aren't quite aware of what we're talking about when we talk about Arches and Hydrogen Hub, if you might want to just give you a really high level overview of what that means.
Absolutely. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you to fill in the gaps because I'm sure I'm going to leave some things out. But the U.S. Department of Energy set aside, I think it's $7 billion to create, $8 billion, $8 billion, but I think they're releasing the first 7. $8 billion to create a minimum of 4 hydrogen hubs across the U.S. That's the minimum number. They haven't actually set a specific number, but those hydrogen hubs, they're calling it the U.S. DOE Energy Earth Shot. And that is to achieve $1, 1 kilogram of hydrogen produced for $1. And that's renewable hydrogen. And that is the goal, to create that they're trying to kickstart a nationwide hydrogen economy that produces renewable hydrogen cost effectively, so that we can off-ramp from fossil fuels, so we can stop digging carbon out of the earth and releasing it to the atmosphere as quickly as possible. And they're seeing hydrogen as a core activity to accelerate the decarbonization of society. They released last week the formal RFP for the hubs applications. As you can tell, because of the scale, we're looking at not just individual states, but regions of the country, areas where states can align their efforts to create these distribution nodes within the US. What's interesting is US DOE set California as the only individual state in the country as a potential hydrogen hub. So what we're seeing, the activity that we're seeing on the ground in the US in terms of applicants to hydrogen hubs, is we're seeing really well-organized activity in New York, in the Northeast, with New York as kind of a central core to one of those regional cooperatives. We're seeing a lot of activity in Texas as well, organizing a central cooperative. And then we're seeing, clearly through the Governor's Office of Economic Development in California, a cooperative effort in California. Just as some backstory, we are working very closely with, we're watching what's going on in Oregon and Washington State, because what we see is a natural progression out of California up the I-5 corridor all the way to the Canadian border. And so, Chris, sorry, I thought I was presenting my screen, but let me put the Arches video. Am I screen sharing, Chris?
You are sharing your slide.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Then yeah. So this is Arches is the California kind of formal application process to apply for a US DOE hydrogen hub. And did I leave anything out?
No, I think you've covered everything really well there. And I mentioned a little bit in the beginning about how we have those 4 locomotives. NCPA would like to transform their energy center in Lodi into using hydrogen. Those are 2 of the reasons those are part of that. Is the folks that have been working on the hydrogen hub have been working on this for a year and been thinking about different ways to pull together to do this. It is not too late to join on the link that I gave you in the chat. If you are interested in being part of this, there's a way for you to submit information to GoBiz to join in the whole thing. If you have not ever done a Department of Energy proposal before, they are a beast. And just because you write a proposal doesn't mean that you win money. So I just want to set expectations there. So we have a little bit of time left, and I'm wondering if anybody has any questions. And if you use your reactions button and raise your hand, I can see that in the panelist, and I can click the allow to talk button, and you're welcome to ask your question out loud, or you can type it in the chat or the Q&A, whichever way is easier for you.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. So Dave, I'm wondering, one thing you didn't really touch on, neither of us talked to 10 about, is about fuel cell buses, transit buses.
Yes.
Can you
absolutely.
talk a little bit about where we are in that? Because in the AC Transit, who has been pretty much a leader in our area with zero emission buses, just revised their plan for innovative clean transit to be fuel cell dominant instead of battery dominant. And I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about where things are with fuel cell transit buses.
Yeah, well, you saw that in my slide that there is a big shift that's happening right now in real time, where we're seeing transit agencies, they're testing out battery electric buses, especially agencies in more suburban or rural areas where the routes are much longer. And they're finding that there are a couple of factors at play. There is the cost to build a battery electric charging hub that's capable of providing enough energy to charge the bus fleet overnight or en route. So the infrastructure costs, and they're finding that the infrastructure costs are significant. And then layer on top of that the ability for the bus to meet the duty cycle of the transit agency's needs. And this is my perspective on what has happened. There's no science in this, it's just from observation. What I think is happening is when advanced clean transit was passed, the cost to purchase a fuel cell electric bus was daunting. It was a very expensive endeavor to buy a single fuel cell electric bus. But as I mentioned previously, we're seeing the fuel cell manufacturing base expand, and so it's getting to that point where the economies of scale are starting to, the price of manufacturing a fuel cell is coming down. And then what the transit agencies are finding is that it is more cost effective to scale hydrogen infrastructure than electrical infrastructure to meet the demands of a fleet of 100 buses, 300 buses, 1,000 buses, right? And so as these economic values are shifting, they're adjusting their playbook based on what they think is affordable and what fits into their revenue structure and their core mission, which is the transport of people at the most, as cost effectively as possible. And so, we have the front runners, AC Transit. You should use them as an absolute, resource. They have some of the best information out there. Sunline Transit out in Palm Desert. They have amazing treasure trove of information. They've started their West Coast Center of Excellence, which is a training institute for people that have to work on fuel cell and battery electric buses. You have Orange County Transit that has implemented, a test program. I think they started with 10 fuel cell electric buses and hydrogen infrastructure to support that. They should have about 3 years of operating information under their belt now, so they would be able to share some of that information as well. So I think that you're going, and then another indicator is we saw Ford come out with in the utility truck category, a joint venture with SoCal Gas to demonstrate a F550 fuel cell utility grade truck, but that certainly could be transferable to, that mid-size transit, shuttle. So just a lot of really interesting activity, both in the vehicle and the, fueling infrastructure spaces.
Thanks. And I got a question by text message. So obviously it's somebody who knows me. We talked a lot, you showed the big plant that Air Liquide is making out in the Las Vegas area, and that is from renewable energy. How is that hydrogen getting to the stations in California?
Sure, that's an excellent question. Right now, hydrogen is trucked. In the early market, hydrogen was being trucked in from as far away as LaPorte, Texas, Louisiana, the Gulf Coast. That was market launch. Now what we have is players like Air Liquide, Linde. They are developing production sites either on the border of California or in California. And they are still trucking hydrogen, from their production points of production to distribution hubs, and then that is also being trucked to the fueling stations. That's the supply chain I was getting to earlier. Where we need to get to, think about this, we're in the early market. The market just launched in 2015. We're what now, like 7 years into the market, right? Whereas gasoline and diesel, that launched, over 100 years ago. So we're 7 years into it. So right now, the volumes are not to the point where you can have pipeline transport of hydrogen, but that is really where we need to get to. And I know that there are several pipeline projects ongoing, here in California, in Utah. I know that the Southern California Gas Company is very active in that space, identifying what the challenges are regarding pipeline transport of hydrogen, and how do they shift to to supporting hydrogen, pipeline delivered hydrogen. And if you look at the Central Valley, I mean, with the pipeline going through Central Valley, that is, and especially with the renewable gas production, base in the Central Valley, I certainly see, pipeline distribution as being really critical.
And I would say in the very early years, some of you all may remember this, but back when I started doing this, every fuel cell vehicle in the world lived at the California Fuel Cell Partnership, and the one and only hydrogen station was at the Fuel Cell Partnership too. And at that time, our hydrogen came from the Air Products production facility that's in San Joaquin County. And it may be a natural question is why we weren't using something that's already there. That hydrogen is all spoken for. So Air Products makes that hydrogen for different manufacturing operations. It's used to make silicon chips. They actually take it up to Washington. It's used to make buck knives. It's used to temper steel. So that hydrogen is spoken for. And while we used to be able to get a little bit of it in the beginning, pretty soon we weren't allowed to have that hydrogen anymore because that plant's at capacity.
Yep.
But we're also seeing companies like Raven SR and Biotech come in now and make hydrogen at points of methane, like the garbage dump or at the landfill, or we're seeing a little bit more of it now with the new bill for consumer food products and how it has to be handled differently. We're seeing startup companies that are just accepting that food waste and looking at turning that into some type of renewable gas. But I want to mention, even with those things, hydrogen is compressed when it goes into a vehicle. So it has to be compressed somewhere. And that's really what we look at is it compressed or liquefied at the point of manufacture, or is it compressed at the point of distribution into the vehicle?
Sure. Well, let me just throw out a couple of thoughts, and just to kind of wrap up the, where is hydrogen coming from? As we see, let's presume California will meet that, 2035 ZEV sales target, right? So as we start displacing, fossil fuel vehicles, there's a significant gasoline production base in California, and that is a significant user of hydrogen. So as we start displacing gasoline, there will be more hydrogen available. Of course, a significant portion of that hydrogen is, from fossil resources, but there has to be a start. And we need to start ratcheting down the fossil carbon content of our hydrogen feedstocks to get to that, 100% renewable goal. And the Hydrogen Council set a 2030 goal for, 100% renewable hydrogen across the globe. And certainly that is, our members are working very diligently to get to 100% renewable hydrogen by 2030. That's one of our milestones. Getting to the efficiency discussion about compression of hydrogen. But what we're seeing evolve on the ground is, first of all, I had mentioned previously that stations are evolving into liquid hydrogen storage, right? So what they're looking at is liquid to liquid transfer, liquid pumping of hydrogen. And then there are two factors that go into hydrogen delivery. The first is the temperature of the gas, because the thermodynamics of hydrogen is it's exactly opposite of every gas on the periodic table, where when hydrogen expands, it heats up. All other gases, when they expand, they cool down. So the hydrogen has to be chilled before it's expanded into the tank of the fuel cell vehicle to make up for that kind of thermodynamic effect of heating up. It's actually chilled to -40 degrees. So maybe not part of that compression story, but part of that chilling story is if you can move liquid hydrogen into the buffer storage where it's compressed to 10,000 psi. Right now the current stations chill that hydrogen before it's expanded into that tank, or they chill it before they expand it to the tank, but you can at least capture the cryogenic properties of that liquid hydrogen that's very, very cold, so that you don't have to take on that step of chilling the hydrogen. It's not getting to your exact point, but it's just an example of how the industry is evolving to adjust to make the system more efficient.
I totally agree with you. And one of the things that, since I've been involved with this, we keep talking about is that we're at the very beginning of this. And you've mentioned a couple of times, we've done an enormous amount of learning in a really short time. And the way that something is done today isn't necessarily the way it's going to be in 3 years from now or 5 years from now, particularly with these H2 hubs that are really looking at getting hydrogen into the pipeline and using pipelines to deliver fuel for a variety of sources where it needs to go. As you're talking about that distribution system, one of the things I was thinking about, we have a lot of fleet clients, municipalities on the phone, or agencies on the Zoom with us today. And as we're doing their plans and we're looking at charging several hundred vehicles in a couple of parking lots, we're always looking at the grid capacity and where our constraints are going to be. So if you're thinking about adding hydrogen to a fleet yard that's behind the fence, do we need to look at grid capacity? Do we need to look at footprint? What do we need to think about when putting it behind the fence in a depot? Absolutely.
There are energy demands. There are electrical energy demands involved, related to any piece of infrastructure, and certainly hydrogen fueling stations do have electrical demands. They're not as great as, for instance, battery charging stations, because the electrical energy needs are not as high, but there is an interconnectivity demand. And so again, I think that what this requires is a systems look at the space. We are trying to get to a complete zero emission ecosystem in California by 2045 with a 2035 goal of 100% ZEV sales. The demand on the electric utility industry to meet that transition will require, what I was told is it's going to require about a 7x markup in terms of labor alone. They need 7 times more people working in the industry to meet all the electrical demand, to modernize, the system, to bring enough electrical power for battery charging and hydrogen fueling stations. In terms of what you need to think about, if you have a plot of land and you're interested in placing a hydrogen fueling station on that land, there is a host of codes and standards that you will need to comply to. And the first and foremost are the fire codes. But luckily, through the partnership, we've been working with the national NFPA. I forget what the acronym stands for, but that's the organization that sets the National Fire Code. And so there are standards regarding setback distances, et cetera, for gaseous and liquid hydrogen storage facilities. And so you will have to make sure that your land has sufficient space to meet those setback distances. That's just the start. There are a slew of fire codes. Our sister organization, FCHEA, they publish a list of codes and standards that you need to abide by, and I can certainly provide the link to that. Oh, and then also GoBiz has published what they call their permitting guidebook. It's also a resource meant to accelerate the pace at which development occurs, and that also lists the codes and standards in California that you would have to abide by. And it's a really outstanding resource. They worked in partnership with the automakers, with the fuel, the developmental community, to make sure that body of work meets the industry's needs.
And although certainly not a code expert, I would say they're not too much different from what you might do to put in a natural gas fueling station.
Yeah.
I think the big difference is the hydrogen tank is stored above ground, whereas other fuels, they're stored underground. So footprint is certainly a consideration in size. If you're going to put in a fueling depot, it's going to take up a little bit more room. But I would say compared to battery charging, it's room in a centralized location where people drive in and out, just like they do at your gas depot. It is not Tetris reorganizing your trucks to get them into charging stations.
Yeah.
So it can work for a space constraint. We're also seeing a number of transit agencies like Sunline Transit that Dave mentioned, and some municipalities really looking at the opportunity to share charging infrastructure. It's a little bit more like operating a card lock station. And then we also have operators like US Gain, who will build a natural gas station for you and operate it, that will also build a hydrogen station for you and operate it, just like they've done there. So I think there are quite a few options on how you deploy it.
Yeah. I see a question in the chat. It's from James Thompson. Is there any information available about the construction equipment and medium duty vehicle plans for fuel cell electric vehicles? Construction equipment is a little far away. There is a lot of activity around forklifts. In fact, forklifts are a big hydrogen fuel cell success story, where we have deployments of fuel cell electric forklifts across the country. The fueling requirements are more modest for forklifts, so they don't have to have as much hydrogen stored on site, and they can operate around a centralized fueling hub. So the deployment, it was really a very appropriate place to start implementing fuel cell electric vehicles. Heavy construction equipment, the biggest challenge is going to be the supply of fuel. As you know, the construction fleets now, they're wet hosed. The truck comes to the site and drives around the construction site and fuels the individual construction equipment, either when they're on break or before, when the site is closed. The industry is working on transport fueling units, but that technology is still expensive. If you can imagine, building a stationary fueling station is challenging. So building a portable fueling station is going to be even more challenging. It can be done, and there are some units that are, that exist here in California, but they're few and far between, and they are costly to produce. So I would say that, the place to look around that off-road equipment space, where proof of concept is going to occur first, is going to be in the port areas with, things like yard hostlers and those massive forklifts that move containers around the ports. We are going to see electrification of those equipment, and we're already seeing pilot projects ongoing, for instance, in Port of LA and Port of Long Beach. But because of the opportunity to centralize fueling, those are going to be the first deployments in that kind of quasi, non-road equipment space. In terms of medium duty vehicles, as mentioned, Ford has that US DOE Super Truck program to develop a F550 fuel cell utility grade truck. I know that there are, for instance, our member companies, Hyundai is being very aggressive. They want to try to expand their fuel cell platform to as many vehicle types as possible. And so, if you look at what Hyundai is doing in Korea in terms of R&D, they're looking to deploy fuel cells in, shuttle buses, transit buses, Class 8 tractor, Class 6 truck, box truck, ships, locomotive. They're looking like Korea is pursuing an aggressive, fuel cell or hydrogen transition plan now. And, Hyundai being one of the largest corporations in Korea is, 100% behind that.
And I'm going to say, I never pass up an opportunity to tell any one of our manufacturers that y'all need public works trucks that run on fuel cells. They don't have, the batteries are really large, and it's hard to do the public works trucks with all the attachments as to where the batteries fit. But a fuel cell is in hydrogen tanks are more like, again, putting in natural gas and using equipment underneath the hood. So I really advocate regularly to build something for you all so that you can comply with Advanced Clean Fleet and have a public works truck or a CCTV van or even a police interceptor vehicle that is going to meet the duty cycle you need and be ZEV at the same time. So I would suggest that every single time that you are at a fleet event where you see those folks showing off their trucks, tell them what you need. Ask them to build you one.
Yeah. What I'm hearing in the Advanced Clean Fleets discussions, when I hear the comments coming in, the groups that are the best organized are the water utility districts, both wastewater and sanitary water. And their issue is they send their utility trucks, to the deep field, and they're running, for instance, pumps off their power takeoff, for 8 hours a day, a full, shift. And then if they can't do that with the battery, they can't run their power takeoff that long and then expect that they can get their vehicle back to base. And so any vehicle that has high PTO utilization, a fuel cell really is going to excel in those duty cycles.
So Cassie, I saw you asked a question about maintenance, and I'm going to give you 3 answers on it. First is the person who owns one, and now owns my second one. The only maintenance I've ever done is about every 15 to 20,000 miles, I have to get the fuel cell insulating fluid topped off. That's really the only thing. I also change my air filter out pretty regularly. Fuel cells need oxygen to run, and that oxygen comes from the air, and it comes through an air filter. And particularly when we've had really super dirty air days, fires, or just dusty air, I just like to replace my air filter to keep my car running really well. So that's what I know about those. Within the fuel cell buses, their biggest challenge early on was both the air compressor, which has been worked through, and the air conditioning system. The air conditioning system runs differently than it does on any other type of vehicle. And that's the limit of my knowledge, is it's different. And so those were big problems in the beginning, but again, something that has been solved. So other than that, the maintenance on a fuel cell vehicle is going to be really similar to a battery vehicle. It's going to be brakes, tires, routine fluid or routine care. There are no fluids, there are no smog changes, there are no belts that have to be fixed.
Yeah. Awesome insights.
So
it's an electric vehicle, like it, similar to a battery electric vehicle. The maintenance costs are generally lower.
It is, and there's nothing that has to be done in a maintenance facility to work on the vehicles unless you are removing the fuel tank. There are no changes to a maintenance facility to work on a fuel cell vehicle.
Great.
All right, I see that we have, I think I've asked enough questions, and we have just a couple more minutes, but I just do want to wrap it up by reminding everybody we will have the recording of this available. Dave will make the presentation available. Dave, I'm wondering if you could just pop your email address in the chat to follow up with them directly. And then the rest of our project team, who are Dave and Mike, who are on this call but aren't allowed to speak from the way it was set up, and I are working together on the plan for San Joaquin County. And so if you have anything that you would like to tell us, like, we'd really like to see a fuel cell hydrogen station here, or this is a great place to put in battery charging, or even a preference that of one thing or the other, we would love to hear from you as you this up, as we wrap up this project. We're also really familiar, we're working with municipal fleets and transit agencies, but we'd still like to hear what you think your challenges are going to be and what we might be able to do or find for you to meet your challenges of transitioning to zero emission vehicles and zero emission fuels. And Dave, I'm wondering if you could put your email in the chat,
yeah,
so that they could contact you, Dave Park and Dave Tokarski. Both, please put your email addresses in the chat, and that way folks can contact you directly with either questions or with ideas of what we could do in this San Joaquin plan to help you in your transition to zero emissions.
all right, let's see. I'm trying to find the chat box.
Okay, I'm putting mine in too.
Yep.
That might be easier. There, and you guys would like to get a hold of me. I know where Dave works.
Actually, Chris,
In my office, Dave
can you
P,
post
and I know
my-
where Dave Tokarski works too.
Can you post my email for me, please? It's dpark@h2f as in Frank cp.org.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then Dave Tokarski put his in there too. He's DMT at DKS Associates. So we appreciate your time today. We have come to the end of our little bit of time together. We hope that we gave you some good information about hydrogen and fuel cells and where things are and where they're going, and some that you can use. We do appreciate you paying attention, and we will follow up with Dave's slides, the recording from this, and our attendee list that we had several requests for, and I apologize that I was not able to make that public while the meeting was running, but we'll certainly share it with everybody afterward. And if you would like to have a follow-up meeting and just talk things about a little bit more, let us know. We're happy to set it up again.
Awesome.
So have a great day, and thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.